The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into Students of the Game. My name is Alex Baumann. Joined by my two co-hosts today, Nathan Glidewell and Kurre Oldenburg. Rivalry weekend in college basketball happened this past weekend. We're going to talk about the biggest matchup, the Iron Bowl of basketball between Alabama and Auburn. But before we get into that, just want to preface it. I know it has been NFL free agency opened up. We're going to wait until we kind of get the plethora of signings, everything all-encompassing, and we're going to have a big episode talking about the winners, the losers, the biggest surprises, most anticipated signings going into the next season. So be on the lookout for that episode coming out in about a month or so when we get the NFL draft in May. So just keep a lookout for that episode in the near future. But let's talk about what's on hand right now. Conference tournaments coming up this week. March Madness right around the corner. Selection Sunday right this weekend. So let's talk about the big game this past weekend. Alabama goes into Neville Arena and takes down the Auburn Tigers 93-91 in overtime. Johni Broome had a chance to win it at the end of regulation, but decided to settle for a step-back jumper over Grant Nelson, who I think had one of his best games in a Crimson Tide uniform. But Nathan, let's start with you and what you thought, how Alabama, after getting manhandled at home by Auburn for most of that game, going into Neville Arena in a hostile environment. It's senior day. They raised the banner. They're thinking about cutting down the nets at the end of the game. How was Alabama able to come into Neville Arena and beat the Tigers after such a poor performance a couple weeks ago against them?
Well, number one, I think it started with the hustle. Hustle is a big asset when you talk about college basketball. If you're not giving your all for all 40 minutes of the game, then you're bound to lose it. I can go back to the last matchup against Auburn at home. I thought there were several times where we were not scrappy enough. We were not the big team to initiate the hustle. We gave up loose balls. We weren't taking care of the ball right. Stuff like that. It's the small details. And I think Nate Oates really prioritized that after the loss to Florida. It's one of those things where it's do or die time in the season. If you're not playing your best basketball now, going into the SEC tournament, going into March Madness, it's not going to look good for you. So now is the time to build momentum. This was basically, I think the team really coming together and maximizing their opportunity. It's the seniors' last chance to play in the regular season game. It's an incredibly huge matchup. I know it means the world to guys like Mark Sears and Grant Nelson, Cliff Morey, Chris Youngblood to be able to compete in a game like this when the last times they'll be able to. So they really don't want to leave it out there on the court, and they gave it their all, and they came away with the win. I think if you want to look at more technical things, people who didn't really have their best season, guys like Grant Nelson and Cliff Morey, who we expected to be bigger contributors throughout the season, who haven't really done the best, they stepped up in this game. They were really the difference maker. Alabama's front court really shined, and I think that's a big thing that they've missed all season long. They took away a ton of pressure from the back court. Mark Sears not having his incredible best game. Of course, he's put up 30 points and wild numbers past few weeks, but didn't really have his best game. Well, Baron Filan really stepped up, but he wasn't really super efficient. Chris Youngblood, he was good, but he wasn't that guy constantly knocking down threes. So you're wondering, all right, where's the offense coming from? Aiden Hallway, he didn't really see the court a lot. So you had your big men step up. A lot of credit to Cliff Morey in the way he was able to play and really defend against Johni Broome 10 times better in this game than the first matchup. Johni Broome is just one of those guys who he will get to his spot, and his footwork is so good he'll be able to score. I mean, as you can see, he still put up incredible numbers in the loss. So you got to give him credit. 34 points is pretty impressive for a big man who doesn't take a lot of threes. But I will say Cliff was able to control a little bit more of the paint, and I think that's a big thing. But a guy you really got to give credit to is the freshman Aiden Terrell. Gave Alabama huge minutes, very physical, especially in his time matchup against Broome because of Cliff Morey's foul trouble. I think that was the main difference maker, having those absent minutes of Cliff. that's the time you worry a lot, especially against a team who likes to attack the paint like Auburn does. And then the guy who I've kind of dogged on all season long for his inept defense in the paint, Grant Nelson, he really steps up, not just on the offensive end, but on the defensive end. I thought his play was incredible. I thought he hustled really, really well. You can see the number of rebounds he was able to get, and he had a huge block earlier on in the game, and he was really able to control the rim. They didn't really attack him as much. I think that's been the story all season long. You pick a guy in the court you want to attack, it's going to be Grant Nelson. He wasn't the greatest defender, but in this game, he really stepped up, and he deserves a lot of credit, and especially on the offensive end, what he was able to do. We've seen flashes like this from him before. I mean, you can go back to the Sweet 16 game against North Carolina last year in the tournament. That's the type of game I wish he could have all the time. And he's had flashes. You go back to the away game at Kentucky in the first half, what he was able to do. But majority of the season, he's kind of been more of a bystander, in my opinion. He hasn't really touched the ball, been able to be aggressive with it, go out and get his own. But he steps up in this game. He is absolutely incredible. He attacks the rim. Huge poster over Dylan Cardwell for the N1. I think that really sparked a lot of energy behind this Alabama team. And really, it showed how much he cared about winning this basketball game. But throughout the game, he hit huge shots. I mean, I've never seen a worse jump shot in my life, but as long as the ball gets in the basket, I do not care. He has that line drive jump shot, and every single time I shoot, I'm like, please do not, please can we pass the ball? And then he'll go in. I'm like, how in the world is he making that? But it was great to see him have the type of game he had. And then I'll touch on one more guy in LeBaron Filon. As a freshman coming into this environment, he definitely did not look like a freshman. He definitely wasn't super efficient. I mean, 5 of 13, that's not something you want to see. But the way he was able to the poise he showed late in the game, especially going into overtime, big seal on Pettiford, going and I believe taking the lead or tying it. It was a big basket. It was a big basket for him, but he had a extremely good game. Hit clutch 3-pointer. He was really able to be a great on-ball defender. I felt like he was our best defender as far as going through screens, and which makes sense. He is the bigger build guard. But I saw a lot of potential in LeBaron's game, and I think that Nate's decision a few weeks ago to really give him more of the point guard duties and really move Mark to the shooting guard and let him play a more natural role at the 2 has really benefited the team a lot. But ultimately, I don't think it comes down to that. I think it just comes down to this team not wanting their reputation to be tarnished by the way they finished the regular season. And they end up getting a absolutely huge win in overtime. Had my heart racing in overtime. Had me lose my mind. For every stupid thing they do, they come back on the other end of the floor and make up for it. It was an incredible game to watch. I think this was probably one of the best games I've seen from college basketball this season, with how back and forth it was, the implications of it. Even though it wasn't for regular season title, it didn't really have any huge implications. It's still a rivalry matchup. It means a lot to the people of the state of Alabama and both fans of both teams and the people on it. So I felt like it was a terrific showdown to watch, and 10 times better than any Duke-Carolina matchup I've seen this year.
Well, let's not talk about that. I might disappear from the screen or the radio here in a second. But Nathan, we were able to attend Alabama's regular season finale last year against Arkansas, where it took a Latrell Wrightsell 3-pointer to win that basketball game. And I think this is a much more important and bigger win going into the SEC tournament, the NCAA tournament. But what does this win do for Alabama after really struggling going into this game, going into the SEC tournament and then NCAA tournament?
Well, it proves that they can win games without hitting a lot of threes. I mean, Auburn shot the 3 ball much better than they did in this game. Hit 3 more than Alabama did. I mean, 7 of 22. If you told me a few years ago that Alabama shot that in a game, I didn't think we were going to win. That's just not something Alabama has been capable of in the past, especially a few seasons ago. That is Alabama's type of team to shoot 43s a game, and if they don't make the regular 10 plus, really 12 plus, they'll lose. That was the narrative that has been said time and time again. Well, this seems completely different. They are able to be incredibly efficient in the paint and attack the paint really, really well. And when there's opportunities to shoot threes, they usually knock them down. Not the best three-point shooting game, but you go on and you look at the SEC tournament and think, well, we can go and still get a possible 1 seed after a win like this. I mean, that is incredible on your resume. But the way the bracket is shaped up, I mean, you will play the winner of the winner of what I guess Georgia, Oklahoma will play, and then that winner will play Kentucky, and then you'll play the winner of that game. But you win there, and then let's say Florida makes it to the semifinal round. You have a chance to avenge a loss at home against a really good Florida team, and perhaps ever take them for a 1 seed. I think that's a big thing. Just being able to build momentum in the postseason going into March Madness is an incredible thing. But also for me, it's not the end all be all. I mean, we all remember last year Alabama looked like they were dead in the water. I don't think you get to pick that team to really go to the Final Four. I know I didn't. I know there are several people that didn't. And I mean, that's something I usually do every single year. So that tells you how unlikely it was for that team to do it. But I would say it is better for this team to build momentum in the postseason. I think the SEC tournament has a lot more implications this year than it ever has, because winning the SEC tournament, in my eyes, is probably going to be harder than winning the national championship, given the type of competition you play. But it's not the end all be all. But I will say this team as a whole, I think they're a lot better built for March than the team last year was, and it's going to be exciting to watch them. I'll speak on Auburn too. I think both teams have this incredible build and style of play that will take them far in the tournament. I don't think we're going to be seeing these first round upsets, or I really hope not.
Fingers crossed.
I would be heartbroken, but Auburn played an incredible game against Alabama, and they were one shot away from winning. That tells you how good these two teams are and how well they've competed this season. And I said this a few weeks ago. I think they're the two best teams in the country. I still think you can make an argument for it, given the competition they played and what they've been through. They're incredible to watch. But yeah, I mean, I guess postseason coming up. I don't want to be that team that loses in the first round. That's all I want.
Well, great. Nathan kind of touched about how the big men dominated for Alabama. And Nate Oates talked about it before the game on that previous Friday. He said there's not a whole lot riding on this game other than pride. And for Auburn, there really wasn't a lot riding on this game other than that, and having the ability to raise the banner and cut the nets down and all that. Fortunately, didn't get to cut the nets down. But what happened to Auburn in this game that allowed Alabama to beat them in overtime, where Auburn really had control of the previous game, the entirety of the matchup?
Yeah, and I don't disagree that Auburn had control of most of this game on Saturday as well. But the difference, and you can lump the Texas A&M loss on Tuesday into this as well. The difference is effort on the rebound again and in the paint, and that's something that's motivation ensued. That's also something that's coachable. So I don't think these two losses are red flags for Auburn at all, because not only did you lose to two incredible teams, two teams that can make runs in March, just like we've mentioned, but I would love to play Texas A&M again. I would love to play Alabama again, because I think Auburn's better than both of those two teams. And just like Nathan mentioned, and just like you mentioned, Alex, Nate Oates is completely right when he said not a lot of much right on this game outside of pride, because Alabama went into Neville Arena and beat Auburn. Auburn dropped from number 1 overall seed to the number 1 overall seed, and that's just how it is. Just because the body of work that they've built all season up until then, there's still 5 more quad 1 wins than second on that list, which I think is Alabama. I think it's Alabama and Michigan State are tied at 11 right now. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong on that. That may be 1 or 2 off, but it just shows the type of competition that they've played all year and the body of work that they put together. But in this game particularly, I think you could point out the positives, you could point out the negatives. The negatives are you got out rebounded again. That can't happen. That cannot happen come the Elite Eight, come a Sweet 16 team where you're playing a team that wants to beat you so bad. And a lot of that comes with staying out of foul trouble. Foul trouble didn't kill Auburn in the Alabama game, but in the Texas A&M game, Dylan Cardwell got in foul trouble. He's your best rebounder. Janai Broom's big. Janai Broom's a great rebounder. But Dylan Cardwell is the guy who gives the most effort on the defensive glass. Him coming out really hurt Auburn in that Texas A&M game, and it was able to go on a run to end the first half, and Auburn was never able to catch back up with that. I thought Auburn's guard play over the past few games has been really, really good. It's been really, really good. Tahad Pettiford has stepped up huge, and it started in that Kentucky game where he kind of took over when Denver Jones went out with an injury. He was outstanding. It played played the entire second half of that Kentucky game and basically won the game down the stretch for Auburn, with Janai Broom not having a good game. And then the Texas A&M game, he was making threes and defending super hard. And in this game, he had an incredible first half. So I really love what I'm seeing from Tahad. Great to have Denver back as well. Denver gave Mark Sears all that he could run for again in this game. And you're talking about Mark Sears no, he's not he is the best Alabama basketball player ever to play at the University of Alabama. And what Denver Jones did to him in 80 minutes of basketball this year, especially with the hurt ankle in game number 2 in Neville, is very, very impressive. So it's good to have him back. Miles Kelly shooting the lights out. It had an off game against Texas A&M, didn't shoot the ball well, but came back, had an incredible game against Alabama after making 9 threes against Kentucky. So it's really good to see those guards starting to play well. And then another positive from this Alabama game is, Janai Broom played terrible against Kentucky. It just something looked off. It didn't look like he was comfortable in the post. Amari Williams was giving him problems on the perimeter as well. Kentucky was guarding him out on the perimeter, which a lot of teams have not so far this year. It was giving him problems. Texas A&M gave him problems as well. He also re-injured that shoulder that he hurt in the Georgia State game in December in that Texas A&M game. It was giving him problems. He's back. He's back. That is the biggest positive takeaway from this Alabama game is nothing's wrong with the player of the year. He's fine. He's fine. There's still some shots where I think he's short arming it that we never saw him miss last year. And then at the beginning of the year, you never saw him miss either. And then he injured that shoulder, that right shoulder against Georgia State. And to get all technical in basketball terms here, Janai Broom is left-handed, but he uses his right shoulder better than I've ever seen any left-hander ever use his right shoulder, because he moves the defender out of the way legally to get that shot where it's unblockable. And it's incredible. But he has not been able to do that recently. It's lead to shots getting blocked, and it's lead to shots getting affected. And that's something that he's just got to adjust to over time. And that's something that, after a month from now, that's the NBA's problem. but it's good to see him back making shots, getting some confidence back, him knocking down some threes, obviously that big 3 at the end of the game. And I know you mentioned that the fall-away jump shot here earlier in the show. You live with that. He's the best player on the floor. He's made that shot in multiple big games down the stretch in this year. You live with whatever shot he takes. I don't want anybody else shooting that. I don't care what shot Janai Broom pulls up, but you live and die by the player of the year. So you live with that. Now, the disadvantages, obviously you lost, but it doesn't affect your seeding. It doesn't affect your championship that you won a week ago. It doesn't change any of that. The disadvantages, man, let's just start right here. Chad Baker-Mazar's got to get his head screwed on straight.
Impossible.
It's so easy to tell that in every single scouting report against Auburn, the main scouting on Chad Baker-Mazara is he is by far the easiest to get in his head. And if you jab him a few times, he's not a big, heavy-set guy, so he feels it more. Obviously, smaller guys feel the big guys hitting them more. He's a guy that feeds off of opposing crowds. He's always been a guy. Him and Todd Pettiford are just guys that I think they play better on the road than they do at home because they feed off the energy of the opposing crowd. Chad has got to know that. And he's done a lot better this year than last year at that, knowing that that's on the scouting report of him and knowing to not let that affect not only the game down the stretch for him, but also his play in general as an individual. He's kind of taken it in as uses. I use the Ole Miss game at Ole Miss as a perfect example of this. Ole Miss's center. I always forget his first name, but his last name is Dia.
Malik, I think.
Malik Dia. Malik Dia. That's it. He is a bigger guy. Ole Miss is getting beat by Auburn down the stretch. It's a free throw. I believe Janai Broom's shooting a free throw or something like that. And Chad's in the middle on the lane stripes. And Dia's just hitting him with his shoulder, hitting him with his arm. Because that's the scouting report. That's what Chris Beard told Malik Dia to do. Because, that ref's not going to see that. It's not unnecessary. But you're bothering Chad Baker-Mazara. And Chad Baker-Mazara is killing Ole Miss down the stretch. He's making everything. And it's a problem. Chris Beard has got to get him out of the game. So he sends the bigger player to do that. And Chad responds by scoring and not letting it affect him. Like he did in the Yale matchup in the first round of March Madness last year, which got him ejected in the first few minutes of that game. That can't happen. In this game, in the Alabama game, the officials lost control of this game. 100% Doug Shows and Terry Oglesby lost control of this game.
Surprise, surprise.
Because Chris Youngblood and Chad Baker-Mazara, 3 plays prior to Chad unnecessarily elbowing Youngblood in the back of the neck, had both ended up inadvertently slapping each other in the face. It was inadvertent, but it's something you've got to address to those players. Didn't do that. Earlier in the game, Grant Nelson made an absolutely incredible dunk on one of the best shot blockers in the country in Dylan Cardwell. He then did the crane kick, which has become famous since John Mechie scored the final 2-point conversion in the 2021 Iron Bowl. He then did the crane kick. By rule, that is a taunt. You may not call that a technical foul. You may not want to go there to call that a technical foul. But you have got to address that to that player and that coach. They did not. The play before, Chad Baker-Mazara elbows Youngblood in the back of the neck. Going up for a rebound. Chad inadvertently ends up on the floor. And Youngblood inadvertently, not on purpose, stomps on his wrist while he's laying on the floor. Youngblood didn't know he was there. But that right there was the reason Chad Baker-Mazara lost his cool and allowed what Youngblood did inadvertently to change the game. Completely changed the game. Auburn wins that game with Chad Baker-Mazara on the floor in the last 11 minutes. Because Chad Baker-Mazara is worth more than 1 point in an 11-minute game that went to overtime. So it's that simple. Chad Baker-Mazara, if he doesn't have his head screwed on straight, doesn't allow the opposing team scouting to work on him, Auburn will be cost of another heavy run in March. I say another because that's exactly what stopped Auburn against Yale. Because that completely changes the game plan. And down the stretch, that completely changed your lineups. Because Alabama was then able to go bigger than Auburn. Because Auburn had to include both of Todd Pettiford and Denver Jones in the final lineup. Instead of having Miles Kelly at the 2 and Chad at the 3. So it completely changes the game. Completely changes the Yale game. Just like for the better, it changed that Ole Miss game in Oxford a few weeks ago. So I said 2 years ago, Auburn had a player named Wendell Green, and Auburn was going to go however far Wendell Green took him. He was either going to go for 30 and Auburn was going to blow somebody out, or Wendell was going to struggle and Auburn was going to lose. You can't really say that about a player of the year like Janai Broome, because Broome has had off games, but Auburn has been able to overcome those, like that Kentucky game where he did not play well, but Miles Kelly decided to make every shot he took. And like the games where Janai Broome was out due to injury and Auburn still decided to win. So it's hard to say that about a guy like Janai Broome, but man, is it easy to say that about a guy like Chad Baker-Mazara. He's going to go however far. Auburn's going to go however far Chad Baker-Mazara takes him. And if he allows that to happen again, it's going to cost him. And if he doesn't, Auburn could be cutting the nets down in April. It's that simple.
So before we get going into the award winners from the SEC that was released earlier on Monday, what were your guys' thoughts on the regular season from both your teams, and then the postseason expectations you have for each of them? Nathan?
I don't know. Mark Sears, he got off to a slow start this season. I think that was the big thing for me. We, especially after watching him in the Final Four and what all he was able to do in March Madness last year, we had these unbelievable expectations for him to come in, be the National Player of the Year. I think a little bit got to the point where it was too high of an expectation. Mark Sears is an incredible player, and he proves that time and time again. But given his role in the court, I felt like it's a very hard thing for a guard to go and win a National Player of the Year in college basketball, just because the way college basketball is built. And I think we've seen that time and time again. I mean, a guy like Luke Garza won it a few years ago, and what's he doing now? He barely shoots the court for the Timberwolves. So a lot of it isn't about how good of a player you are. A lot of it comes down to kind of what position you play. And I'm not saying he couldn't have won it, but it's a much harder thing to win as a guard than it is for a big man. So I think that was a expectation that was kind of too high for him. But like I said, he got to a slow start, and he struggled a lot playing the natural point guard position. I think you go back to last year and kind of missing Aaron Estrada is the big thing for me. Aaron Estrada was a guy who could take the ball away from Mark Sears and really make it more and allow him to play the natural 2 position, which Nate ended up realizing kind of later on in the season that's what he needed to go back to and kind of plug in LeBaron at that spot. But I felt like Mark Sears has had one of the best careers I've ever seen in Alabama jersey. So I will say he met my expectations. I tried not to inflate it too much for him. And then coming into the season, having as a team, I would say Alabama has kind of reached those expectations. I think there's a few things I've nitpicked, but for the most part, I mean, I can't really complain. I mean, we were in the top 5 or top 10 or whatever, top 25 all season long. We
top
finished
10, I think, all season. Yeah,
we finished top 5. So we're a very good team. The guys on it, I think I had a little bit more of expectations for Cliff Amore and what he was going to be able to do. And that just didn't really work out. I don't know if that's just the natives offense and the system going from playing at Rutgers where he was kind of the main show, and then coming into Alabama where he was kind of more of a we need you to play this role kind of guy. I think that's probably a little bit of a takeaway from that for me. But then you got a guy in Chris Youngblood who has been absolutely insane ever since he has been able to step in since his injury. It's been hard, I think, for the most part, to get a real picture of the team because they haven't been fully healthy all season. Losing Latrell Wrightsell has been the most detrimental thing to this team. And I will say, however long the season goes on, whatever they do in March, that they have missed him dearly. He is not only a leader on the court, but off the court. And I felt like that has played a big part in the execution of everyone alongside of them. So I think that's a big thing for Mark Shears, not being able to play alongside Latrell and some of the other guys that are accustomed to playing alongside him because they feed off his energy. He is an incredible leader on the floor, not to mention an incredible player. So Alabama has lost him and really missed him all season long. But as far as expectations, I would say they were met or exceeded in some spots. I will say exceeded because of what LeBaron and Philon has turned out to be, what Aiden Holloway has turned out to be. Those two guys have really impressed me. And then, of course, Aiden Terrell, Mohamed Diabate as well. I need to mention them. And then it's a hard thing to have expectations in college basketball because you never know how the season's going to go. You think you're going to have the best team in the country, Kansas, and then it totally flops in front of you. So I feel like in certain situations it's unreasonable to have these expectations to go and win a national championship, even when you know you have a loaded roster. Because at the end of the day, these are guys the same age as us going out and playing in these incredibly stressful environments, and they have about as much as control over as we do in some scenarios. But they are great athletes, and I've been impressed with them. So I would say, in my humblest terms, they met my expectations.
Ray, what about you with the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, however sour the taste was left at the end of the regular season, losing the last two games of this regular season, I mean, how can you not say A+? Because might I remind y'all, the lowest Auburn was in any poll this year was at the very start of the year. Auburn was preseason number 11 coming into the year. Boy, did they take that and shove it up voters' asses because Auburn had one of the best regular seasons of all time in college basketball. And a lot of that was helped out and due to the amazing schedule that they had and how good the SEC was this year. And so it's definitely exceeded my expectations for sure. I didn't know what to expect this year. Had a lot of incoming pieces that we didn't know how they would fit with the mold that Auburn already had coming back. And you see guys like Tahad Pettiford and Miles Kelly just fit right into that mold. And you see guys like JP Pegues who didn't, but is still on the bench and is still working hard in practice and is still here. Is still getting honored at senior day. And I think what Bruce Pearl and his staff did this year with the expectations that they had incoming was nothing short of spectacular. I mean, you're going to be the number one overall seed. You won the SEC. You won the best conference ever to play college basketball in a season. You won it by multiple games. You're the one seed in that tournament. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the postseason, but 16 quad one wins. You talk about wins at Houston. You absolutely demolished Purdue. Wins at Alabama. Win against Tennessee. These wins. You won at Kentucky for the first time in 37 years. It's just, it's however it ended, it's still A+, no question.
Now let's talk about the awards here because as I mentioned, they came out earlier on Monday. Coach of the Year goes to Bruce Pearl. Player of the Year goes to Janai Broome. Newcomer of the Year, Chaz Lanier of Tennessee. Freshman of the Year, Trey Johnson of Texas. Sixth man of the year, Caleb Grill from Missouri, and defensive player of the year, Zakai Ziegler at Tennessee. Do y'all agree with all of these player of the year, defensive player of the year, all those type of awards?
It's the only one I really have a major problem with is defensive player of the year. Zakai Ziegler isn't even the best defender on Tennessee. Much less the best defender in the SEC. Zakai Ziegler has he gets a lot of steals. That doesn't make you a good defender. And neither does a bunch of blocks either. What matters is what you do to your matchups. And Meshack is by far the best defender on that Tennessee team. It's not even close. I have a problem with that one. Every other one, I mean, you can nitpick and argue, but it's the right choice. But a defensive player of the year, I have a major issue with, because I feel like we're valuing stats and numbers at that point relative to what defensive player of the year actually means. And that's just, making Zakai Ziegler the defensive player of the year of the SEC this year is just like what they do to defensive player of the year in the NBA. It's like, who has the most steals, who has the most blocks? That's ridiculous. Rudy Gobert is not the best defender in the NBA, but he's won that award so many daggum times because he has the most blocks. Because he stands under the basket and he's 7'1" and he's got long ass arms. You can't, that doesn't make you a good defender. Denver Jones is by far a better defender than Zakai Ziegler. You can ask Mark Sears. You can ask Zakai Ziegler. You can ask Wade Taylor. Wade Taylor was the lucky one that didn't have to deal with Denver Jones this year because of the injury. Ask Otega Owe what it was like in that Auburn Kentucky game when Denver Jones was in there, and relative to when Denver Jones had to come out due to the injury. You go on and on. We can even go out of conference. Ask Con Knippel at Duke. Ask Tyrese Proctor at Duke. Ask LJ Cryer at Houston. Ask Braden Smith at Purdue. Ask Walter Clayton Jr. at Florida. It's not Zakai Ziegler.
I think a lot of it has to come with the AP and all these press people getting the votes. Really think it should just come down to opposing players and coaches in the conference voting on these awards because they've played them, they've coached against them, they've coached them. If you want to get rid of the bias, you can prevent coaches and players from voting for people on their own team. But having the press, they have their own agendas when it comes to these type of things. A lot of times they don't watch all the games. They don't watch Denver Jones at Auburn all the time. They just look at the stats. They go, okay, I haven't watched every Auburn game this year. I haven't watched any big SEC games that I need to this year. Well, let me go look at the stats. Oh, there's Zakai Ziegler at top of the steals. Oh, there's Janai Broome blocks. So let me put Zakai Ziegler here. And I think that's the big issue when it comes to a lot of the awards, like you were talking about, Gray, not only in college basketball, but the NBA, is these press people don't have the ability to watch the 100-plus games that come out throughout the year. They just look at the stats. They nitpick the games they want to watch, and they just see, okay, in that game, Zakai Ziegler had 5 steals. Let me just put him there. So I think that's the big thing when it comes down to some of these awards is the press having more say-so than coaches and players do in the conference. Talking about the all-SEC teams, first team, Janai Broome, Walter Clayton Jr., Mark Sears, Wade Taylor, Zakai Ziegler. Second team, Josh Hubbard, Trey Johnson, Chaz Lanier, Collie Murray-Boyles, Otega Owe, and then the third team, Chad Baker-Mazzara, Alex Condon, Jason Edwards, Mark Mitchell, and Sean Padula. Gray, you were shaking your head a little bit there. Any disagreements, Gray or Nathan, with the list here?
I have a problem with 2 players on the first team, Wade Taylor and Zakai Ziegler. I don't agree with that. There's no shot that they should be ahead of Chaz Lanier. There's no shot that they should be ahead of Otega Owe or Colin Murray-Boyles. I know Murray-Boyles only won one or two SEC games at South Carolina. That has nothing to do with this. And why is Alex Condon all the way down on third team? What are we doing there? What is Mark Mitchell doing all the way down at third team? He's got to be a second team type player. What is Josh Hubbard doing on this list? He had a great game when they played Alabama at home. He shot it really efficiently. He did really well. They lost that game. because their big man decided not to dunk the ball instead of trying to lay it out. But what is Josh Hubbard doing on this list? You cannot tell me he is more important than Sean Padula, Mark Mitchell, Chad Baker-Mazara, Alex Condon. You cannot tell me he's as important as Chaz Lanier, Trey Johnson, Otega Owe. No, absolutely not. And honestly, I understand. Yes, you have 5 people on an all first team and all second team. That's how those things work. They're positionless, so you don't worry about the positions, that sort of thing. But Janai Broome, Walter Clayton Jr., and Mark Sears are in a completely different tier than everybody else on that list, especially Wade Taylor and Zakai Ziegler. That's my only issues. I don't really have like a specific issue like I did with the Defensive Player of the Year, but man, we could have done this better.
Nathan, any other disagreements?
At this point, I'm just going to let Gray speak for me because he just gets my point across before I can use anything.
All right, well, since Gray got to speak the last few times, let's talk about the all-defensive team here. Denver Jones, Jemai Mashack, Cameron Matthews, Anthony Robinson II, and Zakai Ziegler. Obviously, Zakai Ziegler ends up winning Defensive Player of the Year. Nathan, since Gray, like I said, got to talk about the past 2 times with the award winners, thoughts on Janai Broome not being on this list?
Again, we put Zakai Ziegler here. Why? I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But I don't know if you've watched Zakai Ziegler play at all this season, but he has been torched by opposing guards time and time again. Number of times he's been beat to the basket. He is just abysmal when it comes to guarding guards in the paint. I haven't been previous years. Sure. He's been a great defender, but not this year. Not he has not been a better defender than Janai Broome. I mean, you can keep going down the list. There are way more deserving people in the SEC that deserve to be on this all defensive team than a guy like Zakai Ziegler this year. I feel like it's just name recognition at this point. And the fact that we give him the SEC Defender of the Year, I mean, that is the stupidest thing ever. I am so tired of people getting rewarded just because they have done something in the past. Like, sure, you got to give them recognition, but they don't automatically get to win the award every single year. They don't get to be on this team every single year. It should mean something to make this team. And when you throw Zakai Ziegler constantly on it, it takes away all the credit from it.
That's exactly the problem. And both of y'all just mentioned that, but I want to make the point of Nathan just said Zakai Ziegler was a great defender in the past. That's exactly what the problem is. Zakai Ziegler was not a top 5 defender in the SEC this year. No, I wouldn't have him top 10 defender in the SEC this year. But those those voters, just like Alex was mentioning, those voters, when they think of Zakai Ziegler, they haven't watched these games, just like Alex said. They think, oh, he's a good defender. That's right, because he had a lot of steals. Oh, all defensive team. That doesn't make any sense. There's no way he should be on here above Dylan Cardwell, much less Janai Broome. Dylan Cardwell averages almost 2 blocks a game. He's making a more defensive impact than Zakai Ziegler was all year. Did y'all watch what Mark Sears did to Zakai Ziegler relative to what he did to Denver Jones?
Dirty bomb.
If you want to look at the stats, make it easy for yourself.
There is one big man on this list. It's Cameron Matthews. And you can argue he's a good kind of a swing.
He is definitely deserving to be on this list. But the fact that Janai Broome got left off is absolutely incredible to me. I mean, these people do not watch basketball. They do not watch games.
All right. The last thing before we end off the show here is the all SEC team. Jeremiah Fierce from Oklahoma, Trey Johnson, Texas, Asa Newell, Georgia, Tahad Pettiford, Auburn, and the Baron Philon, Alabama. Any gripes, complaints, or was this like the first
they
time?
They got it right. They got
this one right. They got this one right. Now they got lucky that there were 5 freshmen in the SEC this year that separated themselves from all the other freshmen. They got lucky with that, but they got this one right. This is the correct list, the only list. And not only are these 5 freshmen by far the best SEC freshmen this year, you could argue there's only a few more freshmen in the country that are better than some of these as well.
Yeah. I mean, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, and maybe
Maybe
the
Derek
center,
Queen at Maryland.
Derek Queen at Maryland. Yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head right now. That might argue better than these guys. But Trey Johnson, I mean, he's up there. He's up there, one of the
For
best,
sure.
if not the best.
Incredible.
All right, well, we'll be back next week with the bracket. Will come out for March Madness. We'll talk about the matchups, try to pick some upsets, hopefully get some of them right. Maybe
Not doing as bad
on-
as last year.
maybe not, depending on time constraints, try to make a haphazard bracket or kind of break it down a little bit. But we'll be back next week with the bracket, breaking it down, all that for March Madness, because it's crazy. It's March, baby. It's Tom Izzo's month.
Michigan State's good, too.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.